Good day, everyone. So today I'll be talking about, I'll be sharing about the GST, that's the Goods and Service Tax as it applies in Canada. So I'm talking about the Canada Goods and Service Tax, and basically not to orientate or to teach you about what GST means, but just to share one information. And this is something I was also a victim. I didn't get to know until after about a year when I immigrated into Canada. You might not know, especially if you are new, that you may be entitled, or do I use the word entitled, or you may be qualified to GST, HST credits. You know, that is, you may be eligible to get payments from the government as a refund of some of your expenses that you must have incurred. Yeah, so in Canada, just like we have it in most countries, in Nigeria, where I come from, we have what we call the value-added tax. So that's tax levied on every goods or every qualifying goods and services that you may have enjoyed. So in Canada, it's called the GST, Goods and Service Tax, and this is a tax that is levied by federal government. So levied and administered by the federal government. It helps the government um, fund programs and services. So that being said, GST, like I said, is a federal tax that is charged on most and not all, most goods and services that is sold and provided in Canada. So, and the rate is 5% across Canada-wide. GST is 5%. And aside from GST, there are some provinces, not all provinces, there are some provinces that have their own localized or provincial taxes that is also levied on goods and services. Provinces like Manitoba, like British Columbia, and some other provinces have their own additional taxes. British Columbia, for example, levies 7% on goods and services provided within BC. And I think it's the same thing for Manitoba also. Some other provinces have their different rates. So that would be in addition to the GST that is being levied at the federal government level. So which means for every goods you buy in Canada, you are most likely paying additional expenses, which is GST and PST. The provincial tax is referred to as the PST. However, we have some provinces who decided not to have a specialized or a provincial tax. And they have decided, not that they did not have, in quotes, they do have, but they don't levy it separately from the GST. So they've decided to harmonize their own tax to that of the federal government, which is the GST. So in those provinces, their own taxes are referred to as HST. That's the harmonized sales tax. Provinces like Ontario, like New Brunswick, and some other provinces have or they practice the HST nature of tax. Except for Alberta, who currently does not charge a provincial tax. So every goods and services you incur in Alberta is provincial tax free. You only pay GST. So that being said, today is not to teach GST or HST, the rates and all the rest, but it's just to inform to as many that are not aware or to as many that are new to Canada that are also planning to move to Canada, that in Canada, you may be eligible to GST, HST credit. It's like a subsidy by the government. It's a way or it's a process by which the federal government refunds a part of taxes of GST that you might have paid during the period. And this GST refund is usually paid on a quarterly basis. Before I continue, I'd just like to say this information I'm giving is what it takes as of today, and this might change um, subsequently. But as of today, this is what it takes Canada, and this video is just for information education purpose. And so I will still advise that you might visit the Canada, the CRA. CRA is the body or the regulatory body in charge of administering GST. So that's been said, some provinces that practices and the HST rates is we have Ontario, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Newfoundland, and Prince Edward Island. So what does GST, HST credit really means? I've mentioned earlier, is a tax-free quarterly payment that helps individuals and families with low and modest income offset the GST or HST that they have paid or they paid during the period. However, it may also include payment from some provincial and territorial programs. So that's another discussion that I would portray or talk about in my subsequent videos. As earlier mentioned, this credit is not automatic. It doesn't mean when you get to Canada on day one, on a quarterly basis, the government knows about you and they begin to start paying you the GST refund. You need to apply for it, and before you apply for it, it's good for us to know if you are eligible or not and what are the eligibility criteria. So I'll be sharing the eligibility criteria with every one of us. First of all, you have to be at least 19 years old, which means if you are from 19 years old and above, then you may be eligible to get a GST, HST credit. However, if you are under 19 years old, you must at least meet one of the following conditions, one of the following criteria during the period. So one, you must have a spouse or a common law partner. You are a parent and you live with your child. So if you're under 19 years old and if you're under 19 years old, you are not eligible. However, the exception is for you to be eligible if you're under 19 years old is that you must meet one of the following conditions. Either you have a spouse or a common law partner, or you are a parent and you live with your child. Then the second criteria for you to be eligible for this credit is that you need to be a resident of Canada for tax purposes, which means, yes, you must be working, because if you are not working, of course, you will not be paying your personal income tax, you won't be filing your tax. So you must be a resident of Canada for tax purpose, either a permanent resident or a temporary resident, or you must be a resident for tax purpose during the month before the CRA makes payment, or at the beginning of the month that the payment is made. So if you meet these two criteria, you go to Canada, you are at least 19 years old or more, and you're a resident of Canada for tax purposes. I mean, that is, you have your SIN, you work, you pay tax either as an entrepreneur, a sole proprietorship business, or as an employee, and you file your tax, then you're eligible for this criteria. Like I said earlier, it's not automatic, but you need to apply for this tax credit. So without much ado, what I basically also want to share again is to show you how you can apply for the tax credits. So on your arrival to Canada, I will advise you don't waste much time. Immediately you know you are a resident, you meet these criteria as I've earlier mentioned. You go to CRA website and you register. Of course, you must have gotten your SIN by then and some other information. So where you can get the form is where I'll be sharing my screen shortly to show you where to get where you can get the form. Just a minute. Share. Okay. So now just need to log on to Canada.ca. Depending on the language you speak, for the purpose of this video, I'll be clicking using the English language. That's what I'm fluent with, and that's what I speak. So you click on the English language, then you scroll down to benefits. There are a number of benefits that you can actually benefit or that you're eligible to as a Canadian resident, but I'll be taking it one after the other. So today, like I mentioned, I'm talking about the GST HST credit. Then you go straight to the to family and caregiving benefit. You can see the description: child benefit, dental benefit, and GST HST credit, maternity, parental, and caregiving benefit and leaves, help for the cost of raising. So just click on family and caregiving benefits. That takes you to the next page, and you can see a GST HST credit. These are the benefits you're entitled to. But so click on GST HST credit, and these are all the information you need. The overview, like I mentioned earlier, overview, eligibility, apply, how much you can expect to receive, and the payment date. So you go to the overview, like I explained earlier, the goods and services. The goods and services tax, harmonized tax, sales tax credit is a tax-free quarterly payment that helps individuals and families with low and modest income offset the GST or HST that they pay. Then go to the next page. This is eligibility. I've explained this earlier just for information purpose. At least 19 years old, resident of Canada during the tax period. Then, excuse me, apply. So this is what we're going to, this is the form you need to apply. So now new residents of Canada must apply for the credit. Like I said, it's not automatic. You must apply. You do not need to do your first tax return. Excuse me. You do not need to do your first tax return before you can get the GST or HST credit. You can apply using one of the methods below. Only one application per household, which means if you are in Canada with your family, both spouses, husband and wife, cannot apply at the same time. So one needs to just apply. Is one application per each household. So if you are a new resident of Canada and you have no children, so it's advisable that you use this first link. It's the same from RC151. But this is an online version. So you just click, you fill it online. It's quick, convenient, and eliminates the need to mail. You don't need to mail or print out documents. However, if you are a new resident of Canada and have children who are under 19 years old, so download and print the PDF form. It's the same form. So I'm just going to use the download version to explain the process and the key information you need to fill. So you need to download the form. You're going to download the form right away. And this is the form. Ways to get the form. Use the online form. We're not using the online form. I want to use the PDF version. assuming with an assumption that um, whoever is filling is actually here, which is family or our family, and with the assumption that I want to send a PDF copy. However, like I said, it's the same information, the same logic. So you must not open the file. So this is the fillable PDF form. I'm downloading, and here we are. So this is the form, and just fill up the basic information you're seeing, and you arrive to Canada, and after your necessary registration with the Service Canada, you'll be issued a SIN. Of course, you must have submitted your necessary documents, your immigration documents, and all the rest, your passport and whatever you have, or even if it's a PR document and the rest. So you have your SIN, which you put in here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. SIN, name is Victor, last name is Anadele, date of birth is 1990, month is October 31st. Your language of correspondence, I've still be selecting English. Your phone number, maybe your Canada number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10 digits. Your mailing address, that's where you live. Put your apartment, let's say you're unit 2, and your street number, let's say 447 Holistic Road, and city, whichever city you are. You might put the city, let's say Vancouver. Select your province or territory, as the case may be. Let's say British Columbia. You put in your postal code, always a 6-digit code. Put it there. Then have you moved from a different province or territory within the last 12 months? So I'm assuming you are new to Canada. This is not like moving within province, you move directly from your country to Canada. Let's say no. If you has entered the previous province or territory and the date you moved, so you are not, you didn't move, from any province, so this is not required. The date you moved, then that's your mailing address, is your home address. Mailing address is the address that correspondence will be sent to. Then you have your home address. Home address is where you live. In most cases, it's always the same thing. But if it is different, you just fill in as required. But if it's the same, you just check same as mailing address. Then you scroll down. What's your marital status? I assumed, like I said, that okay, let's say you are married, and if you are not married, just can say single. Single means none of the other marital statuses applies to you. Then you move down. Enter the date the selected status began. Leave it blank if you have always been single. So if you've always been single, you don't need to fill this particular portion. But let's say you are married, and you need to put the date you got married here. Let's say you got married in, let's say 2020, let's say January, and let's say it was on the 25th of January you got married. If your marital status have changed since you became a resident of Canada, select the box. That is probably you got into Canada married, and while in Canada you divorced. You can put divorced, you separated, or let's say you got to Canada as a single, and in Canada you got married. Then you come to say, okay, I'm married now. If your marital status has changed since you became a resident of Canada, you need to put the dates that happened. If you selected married or living common law, enter your spouse or common law partner's information. So you need to put your spouse information there. If you are married, And then your spouse information should be here, first name, last name, date of birth. If your spouse or common law partner's address is different from yours, enter it here. If you guys live separately, you need to put the address here. But if you live together, then um they say if otherwise the address will be updated to match. So if otherwise, just leave it blank. Um, then if you are actually married before coming to Canada, but your spouse is a non-resident of Canada, that is your wife or husband is living outside of Canada, you need to check this box to say, okay, your spouse or common law partner. So in that case, the address should be different. She or he might be having a foreign address. So you just click your spouse or common law partner is a non-resident of Canada. Okay, so step 4 is your residency status and who is considered a resident of Canada. The most important thing to consider when determining your residency status in Canada for income tax purpose is whether or not you maintain or establish significant residential ties with Canada. Significant residential ties to Canada include you are living in Canada, that's a home in Canada, or you have a spouse or common law partner in Canada, or you have a dependent in Canada. So that's if you meet any of these, then you are considered a resident of Canada. So for A, if you're a newcomer, which this video is meant for, enter the date you or your spouse became a resident of Canada. Put in your own date here. Let's say you became a resident of Canada, let's say 6 months ago, or let's say January, this is year, let's say 2025, January 5th. Then your spouse, if you come in the same day, then of course it will be the same date. But if your spouse came in, let's say 2, 3, 4 months after your arrival, then you need to put when your spouse also became a resident of Canada. So the section B is for returning residents, which is not for the purpose of this video. Somebody who was once a resident, have left and coming back. That's what that B is meant for. Then you have the step 5, information about the children, which is very, very important. However, where you have kids, CRA requires that you attach evidence of the age of those kids. So that's what this section is saying. You must provide proof of birth if the CRA has not paid benefit to anyone for the child or children for whom we are completing this form. For more information on proof of birth, read that section. We'll get there. So child 1, the information, first name, last name, the gender, male or female, date of birth, city of birth, original city where the child was given birth to, then the province or country if outside Canada. So on the list here, drop down, we have the provinces, but if it was outside Canada, you can easily put the country, say Nigeria, is going to accept it, or whichever country the child was given back to United Kingdom. So it's going to accept it, just type in the country manually. Does the child live with you more than 60% of time? You say yes. And if it is no, you say no. So those are the informations or criteria that I am CRA we use or determine the amount to be paid to you to assess your cost of living. If yes, enter the date the child started living with you more than 60% of time. So if the child is living with you more than 60% of time, you need to enter the date. Is possible you maybe you give birth due to your job or relocation, your child was not living with you for maybe a number of years until recently. And if it has been since birth, you've been living together, just check since birth, you've been living together. Information about the children. Okay, so in this is the continuation of the step 5 above. So if no, select the box that represent the percentage of time the child lives with you. So these are the boxes for you to determine is it between 40 to 60% or less than 40%. So that's the first child. Same information will now apply if you have a second child. So CRA in the form, the provided space for child 1 and child 2, same information. However, just two children's column or section is provided. But if you have more than 2, you are permitted to either make a copy or of this section. If you have 3 children, make 1 more copy of this section. If you have 4 children, make 2 more copies of this section. Fill the same information as it applies to the child and attach to this form when you print out. Or you can just use Form RC151. That's for additional children. You can, so like I mentioned, if you are applying for more than 2 children, you can use Form RC161. That's for the form for additional children. Or you can also attach a separate sheet of paper with the information as above. So I mentioned that earlier on. So your income, enter your and your spouse income. This is section for your income. So the year you became a resident of Canada. So enter the year you became a resident. What year did you enter Canada? Let's say you go to Canada in January, like I mentioned earlier on. This is the year you got to Canada. And enter the income earned from 1st of January of the year you entered Canada above to the date you became a resident. Okay, so for the purpose of understanding and clarity, let's assume okay, the year you enter Canada, let's say I assume Canada, let's say this year, 2025. And so for the purpose of explaining this section, I'm going to assume I got to Canada in July, 1st of July, 2025. Now, this section says enter the income earned from January 1 of the year you entered above to the date you each became a resident. So I now need to decide to determine. I got to Canada July 1, 2025. Assumption now, as mentioned, just for the purpose of clarity and understanding. So if I go to Canada July 1st of 2025, I'm expected to now determine what my income was between 1st of January 2025 to 31st or 30th of June 2025. So I need to put the figure here or the amount here. Maybe you could get that maybe from your pay slip in your previous employment. And if you're a business owner, to generate that maybe from your financial statement, what your income was and what have you. You also need to put the same information for your wife or your husband, also your spouse. Then for the B section now is 1 year before you became a resident of Canada. At least for previous year, I said I assume I came to Canada 2025 July 1st. So I need to determine 1st of January last year, at least 1st of January 2024 to 31st of December 2024. What was my income? So I need to enter that also for myself and for my spouse. So I mean, if the year I entered Canada is 2025, I put it here. This section will be 2024. That is 1 year before you became a resident of Canada. While this year, 2 years before you became a resident of Canada, will be 2023. So this section says fill out this step only if you became a resident of Canada between January 1 and May 31 of the year you entered in section A. Enter the year that is 2 years before you became a resident of Canada, which is what I just did there. For example, if you became a resident of Canada on February 15, 2025, you would enter 2023 exactly, which was what I have done there. The same thing for the income end. For that year, needs to be stated there. Your spouse should be stated there. Having done that, then you sign off. You can't sign electronically. Yes. And so just put the date. Let's say I'm filling today, saying 2025, October 26th. Then having done this, then I'm done. I just print out the form, sign off with your pen here. Attach the birth certificate or whatever supporting document you have to support the age of your children, attach it to it and send to the CRS office. However, the CRS office that the CRS office that you'll be sending this form to depends on the province that you are resident, that you are staying. So let's check other information. This is a general information. I told about the GST credit. I told about eligibility criteria. So the Canada carbon rebate is another ball game on its own, which I'll talk in my subsequent videos. Of course, the CCR is a CCR information. One part that is important for you to know. Okay, so like I mentioned, you need social insurance number that will be given on your arrival to Canada and your registration of BC to Canada BC. Um, so I'm looking for another important section. Example of possible document. Okay, so this is example of, so as proof of birth, send a copy of any of the following documents showing the child's family name. So like I mentioned, this you could send the birth certificate of the children or child. You could send certified copy of the birth registration, hospital record of birth, baptismal or cradle roll certificate or other church record, Indian status card, and your passport. So these are documents that are acceptable to substantiate or support your child and their age. So where do you send the form to after printing out? These are the tax office. We have just three, depending on your location or your provinces or your province. So if you're in Alberta, British Columbia, Manitoba, Northwest Territories, Nunavut, Saskatchewan, or Yukon, the printed form should be enveloped and addressed to Winnipeg Tax Office, PO Box. This is the information. If you are in any of these locations, New Brunswick, Newfoundland, Labrador, Nova Scotia, Ontario, or Prince Edward Island, then the envelope should be sent to Sudbury, Sudbury Tax Center, PO Box. This. And if you're in Quebec, the tax office is located right there in Quebec. So I think this is all you need to know about the GST, HST credit. And like I earlier mentioned, you need not to waste much time when you get in. I wasted a year plus, about 1.5 years before I before I got to know this. Nobody told me. I had no orientation, and I wouldn't want you to do the same mistake I did. So when you get in, when you get your SIN, when you become a resident by virtue of tax purpose, please apply through this form and as explained, and you could be eligible. Of course, you're eligible. You could have known you're eligible before you fill the form, and you on a quarterly basis you get your GST or HST refund, or let me call it subsidy from the government. Thank you so much. I hope this video has been helpful. Um, and please drop a comment if you have any question or you need any clarity on any section I've shared with you. So thank you guys and have a good one. Bye bye.